Now, let's get back to the issue of identity. How do we deal with the world? How do we communicate with the world around us? And sorry to give this analogy, which I don't really prefer, but because it serves our purposes. Anyone who's in IT? Who's in IT? Who knows much about computers? Okay. How do computers deal with information? Like, for example, a name of a person. Give the name of a person to the computer. How is it represented in the computer, inside the PC? How is it? Binary system. Binary system. So, how does the computer deal with devices? A printer? What? Photocopier? Okay, whatever it is. How does the computer deal with that? You need to define it, yes? There's a definition. What do you call this process? It's actually now Windows already has the automatic ability to define hardware. But in the past, you had a CD and you had to define it. Otherwise, the computer doesn't recognize it. And in order for us to deal with the world around us, human beings, objects, events, we have to define them. We have a binary system inside us, but it's a different system. We have a system through which we define things. It's a basic language through which we give value to things. You have two friends, okay? You appreciate one more than the other. Both of them are human beings. But why do you appreciate one more than the other? Because you have different definitions for them. How do you define people? How do you define objects? So in order to deal with the world around us, sorry, are you getting bored here? In order to define things around us, okay, we need to give them certain values. Why do some people mean a lot to you and other people don't mean a lot to you? Why do you appreciate some aspects of life and other aspects you don't appreciate them? Why? Depends on your definition. It depends on your definition. Something could be insignificant to you but vitally important to another person. Why? Depending on the definition. Islam is important in our lives because we have a certain definition of it. Other people have a different definition of Islam, so they're not concerned about it. Okay? Now, when we are born, the first thing we do, we define ourselves. You have to define yourself. You have to define yourself. And I will explain how we define ourselves. Once we define ourselves, our definition of ourselves becomes the reference point. Based on our definition of ourselves, we define other things. And this is why people differ in defining different things. Let me give you the example. Someone who does driving for a living. Someone who does driving for a living. Okay? So without a driving license, he cannot work. Another person, he has all the facilities around his house and he doesn't actually really need to drive most of the time. Driving license to the first person is very important. But to the second one is less important. Why? It's the same driving license and both of them are human beings. Why is it more important to one man and less important to the other one? Can anyone give you a clear answer? Relativity. I need something more specific. Why is it important for the one who does driving for a living and it's not important for another one? Why? Okay, that's part of it. Yes. Okay, Jazakallah khair. Basically, for the first person, it's about usefulness. It's about function. It's about function. Driving license is important to his own definition of himself. This is the way he sees himself. His function is to make a living through driving. Okay? So this is why it's valuable to him. It adds value to him. But the other person doesn't need it, doesn't make any difference. So it doesn't do him a big function. And that's the difference. Okay. The young ones, stay calm. Inshallah, we'll get to you soon. Okay? So the first person, I mean, the value of driving license, it does a huge function, a huge benefit to him. And this is why it's of great value. If it's not of value or importance to you, you don't care about it. So the one person, I know that you got lost. Sorry, the example wasn't probably practical enough, but I'm just trying to show you that we define ourselves based on our function. That's the language the whole world speaks. Look at anything in your life and try to see how much value you have given to that thing. You will recognize the things that are more important to you are the things that are useful, the things that you can use and benefit from. And if they are of no use or little use to you, they have little value. And what defines if something is useful or not? It's the function you choose for yourself. Someone is a sportsman, okay? So being fit is important to his function, is important to him. So if it's important to him, remaining fit is an important part of his life. But if you don't need to be fit in order to, function well in life, being fit is not an important thing to you. So it's based on how you define yourself. Now, people define themselves based on their function. And we define things in the world based on their function. This is how we define things in the world. Now, what is the meaning of worship? What is the meaning of worship? What's the meaning of worship? Worship. What is the reality, the essence of worship? Sincerity. Sincerity is part of worship, is one aspect of worship. Who can give me the essence of worship? Okay, these are the acts, that's the manifestation of worship. But what's the essence? I need the essence right at the back there, yes. Now this, yes. Uncle, yeah. Yes. Jazakallah khair. You know, the essence of worship is love. The essence of worship is love. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And some people take partners along with Allah. They love them as much as they love Allah. So this is the essence of worship. Obviously it takes different manifestations. Now the reason I brought this up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us for what? For worship. What is worship? It's a function. Worship is a function. So this is why we do worship with everything in our lives. Every activity that you have is some sort of worship. Is some sort of worship. Worship is our function. We were created to fulfill this function. If we don't fulfill that, what's the value of human beings? In reality, nothing. If we don't fulfill this function for which we were created, then actually our value goes down. Like you have a car, and the car, and I gave this example before, but I repeat it because it comes in handy. Now someone bought a car. His friend sees him a couple of days later, and he says to him, "How's your new car?" What does he say? His answer is, "I don't have a car," although he has it. Now it turns out that his son keeps taking the car. He drives to work, he comes back, he hangs around with his friends, and he doesn't bring the car home except late at night. The father doesn't get to use it. So this is why he says, "I don't have a car." Why? Because the car doesn't serve the function that was supposed to, or it was bought in the first place for. Okay? So if human beings do not fulfill that function, they have no value in reality. And actually they have a negative value, which is a destructive value. Now when we define ourselves as human beings, we define ourselves, this is what it means to be human, to fulfill your function. As it means, what does a car mean? Driving. If you have no driving, if you don't have this service, you don't have a car. If human beings do not do worship, which is the reason for which they were created, or the function for which they were created, they have no value. So this is why we define ourselves based on our function. What do we worship? Now I come back to the answer of the uncle, the meaning of worship, and now inshallah we'll start very soon. Just give me a couple of minutes to clarify this. Worship means love. Worship means love. Do you know that what we do throughout our lives is love? Is love. People have different words for it. People have different words for it. And based on love, you define yourself. Now, how do human beings function, generally speaking? Through motivation. So when people talk about love, they call it motivation. Today, they call it purpose. They call it meaning. They call it passion. They have different names for it, but it's the same thing. It's love, and it is worship. So if someone comes to you, and this is basically what we do as human beings, we make an image of something, we love it, and after we develop this passion towards it, what happens? We pursue it. Now ask yourself, what do you do in life? What are your aspirations in life? That's your religion. That's your deen. It's what you love and what you pursue in your life. That's deen. Okay? So now when someone comes to you and they say, we don't believe in a religion, we don't have a religion, that's not true. Religion, unfortunately, has lost its meaning as a word. Even, unfortunately, in the Arabic language today, it's misunderstood by the majority of people. A deen means your passion in life. What is the ultimate love in your life? What is your passion in life? What is your purpose? What is the thing that you hang your value on as a human being? Identity of Muslims is supposed to be the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Identity that we have is supposed to be the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the beautiful thing about this identity, that it takes different manifestations. It's the basic form of love which encompasses your life. And then it actually gives rise to every other activity in your life. So when you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you pray. You start to love prayer. Why? Because it brings you closer to Allah. It enhances your love of Allah. Now someone loves soccer or football. They like to play football. Anything that helps them become better at football becomes dearer to them. You want to achieve financial security or independence. You want to become independent, financially independent. Any kind of job that seems to pay off well becomes dearer to you. Why? Because it serves your purposes. It has a function to you. And that's exactly what religion basically means. So atheists, agnostic, each one of them, they have something they love. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ta'isa abdul dinar, ta'isa abdul dirham." And he said another hadith, "Ta'isa abdul zawja." He said, woe to the slave of the dinar, of the dollar, of money. Why? Because money has become their ultimate love that drives everything in their lives. It's at the bottom of every action they do. You see? This is how they define themselves. So you define yourself around your passion in life. You love football so much that it actually affects everything in your life. It affects your decisions. It affects your likes and your dislikes. It becomes your God and it becomes your identity. Someone loves a woman so much that this love absorbs their hearts. This is how they define themselves. So what they like, what they dislike, what they do, what they chase after is all defined by that love. Anything brings them closer to their love is dearer to them. Anything that pushes them away from their love is detested to them. They hate it. They turn away from it. This is what worship means. So the Muslims are supposed to define themselves around love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.